Hello, good morning. Good morning, colleagues, and good morning, the audience online. So I'm not going to make history by being the supervisor who chairs the defense, but but I'm here to introduce our chair for Miss Juliet Ssematimba's defense. Dr. Charlotte Karunji Mafumbo from the Department of History. She's going to chair today's defense, and I will be the most quiet person today so I can use this time to take a lot of notes. Dr. Mafumbo, without further ado, please come and take over your role as the chair.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, members online. It gives me so much pleasure this morning to step in such big shoes and chair this defense. I would like to welcome you all here and welcome the candidate and congratulate you for coming this far. We're going to have an interaction with you, and the panelists will include Dr. Juliet Mugisa from the School of Women and Gender Studies. On the panel will also be Dr. John Balijira, Dr. Jaska Gorovia, Dr. Martin Chamanywa, Dr. Zaidi Sechito, and Dr. Charlotte Karunji Mafumbo. And lastly, we'll also have Dr. Edgar Taylor. Juliet, you'll have 30 minutes in which to present your work. And I'll put up a small note to indicate. But I also want us to use the clock at the back to guide us. And I also want to say, don't rush. 30 minutes are too many, but I'm sure members here will appreciate if we can steal a few more minutes if the time is not enough for you. Our critical reader will take 60 minutes to engage you. And after that, the examination committee members and the panelists will take you through. We've assigned 30 minutes to that activity, after which we shall open it to the public audience. In the meantime, we're relying on Professor Farouk to keep downloading comments that are sent online. And so if we don't have enough time, we shall still share with you some of the issues and questions that will arise online. I think that marks the end of my communication. And I once again would like to welcome you and give you the floor. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chair. My topic is indigenous salt making technology at Kibiro Salt Gardens in Western Uganda, starting from 1894 to 1997. It was supervised by
Associate Professor Kyazike Elizabeth, and Dr. Khanakwa Pamela. I'll start with the introduction and background. In this study, I'm going to be using words like technology, and in this case, I'm referring technology to be how do these people make their salt. And then I'm also going to be using salt gardens. Unlike in other mines at Kibiro, their mines are referred to as gardens, and they are referred to as gardens because of mainly two reasons. One, these gardens have sustained them all throughout their stay in Kibiro, and at the same time, the work is carried by the women, so they look at it as a garden which does not get exhausted but can sustain them all throughout. That picture you are seeing there, it is one of the ladies carrying on the process in the garden, and another person is the researcher together with the guide. Then I'll be also using indigenous technology. Indigenous technology refers to the art, science, skills, tools, traditions, and beliefs that are put forward by the people with important relevance to them and to sustain them throughout the experience in the community. So when I talk about the introduction of my study, I realized that technologies have been advancing in different areas, but with the Kibiro case, it has remained as indigenous technology, which is based on using the simple tools and the wisdom and the knowledge based on traditions. So together, as I talk about that, my study looked at the continuities, changes, and the survival of this technology, which is basically carried out by the women who are the ones controlling these Kibiro salt gardens. And even the inheritance is on the side of the women, whereby it is from the mother to the daughter, and even the mother-in-law can give a garden to the daughter-in-law. Basically, Kibiro is found if I talk about where Kibiro is found, when I talk about the history of the salt making technologies, there has been different technologies and methods all over the world, and one of them is the underground technology. Where they use the underground technology, this is where they use especially the modern methods, for example, the drilling methods, to produce large quantity of the salt. And then we also have the solar evaporation. Under the solar evaporation, they use ponds and especially the water from the seas to carry on the salt. And under solar evaporation, there is use of the mixed methods where they use both the modern and the indigenous methods. Then we have also the technology of the saline soils salt. And this is where Kibiro falls. This is where there is a mixture of soils and water, and then the boiling to produce the salt. So in most cases where we have the technology of the saline soils, they specifically use the indigenous methods. So looking at the location of Kibiro salt gardens, Kibiro is located in the western part of Uganda. It is located in the Albertine Rift, whereby it is also located in a rain shadow area, which cannot support agriculture. Therefore, there are basically two main economic activities in Kibiro. That is the salt making, which is controlled entirely by the women. And there is also fishing from Lake Albert, which is carried on by the men. So when I talk about the Kibiro, it is located in the western, on the south of Lake Albert, and it is basically after Hoima, and then you proceed to Chigorobia, then to Kibiro Salt Gardens. So that map basically shows the location of Kibiro on the bigger map of Uganda, and then basically the small where from Hoima up to the location. Looking at my research problem, I basically looked at the different literatures of other people. For example, we had Kona, who also wrote about Kibiro. We had people like Kamhangire, Uzoike, among others. But in all their studies, they are not bringing out the technology. And at the same time, we see that there has been a lot of advancement in technologies. But for the case of Kibiro, the women have kept on controlling the salt, and they are using the indigenous technology. So using the indigenous technology, that means that it misses the sweeping narrative where they believe that the colonialists had really come and they had disorganized much of the African technologies. In the case of Kibiro, it had not disorganized that technology, but it remained into existence. Therefore, this study went out to find out why has this technology survived in this area. The objectives of the study, I had the main objective, which was all about examining the changes and continuities of indigenous salt making technology at Kibiro and how it shaped the Bunyoro Chitara kingdom. It was guided by 3 specific objectives. One was to examine the role of Kibiro salt in the organization of the Bunyoro Chitara kingdom. Basically, where I'm looking at the role of Kibiro salt in state formation. I had also to explain the stages involved in the indigenous salt making technology practices, and also to discuss the changes and continuities of salt making technology at Kibiro. This study was guided by specifically 2 theories. One of them is the perennialism theory of 1954, which was put forward by Aquinas Thomas and later promoted by Robert Hutchins and Ada. With this perennialism theory, it bases itself on the philosophical fundamentals of unchangeable beliefs, values, skills, art, science, and knowledge. So with the perennialism, they don't just believe in change, but they believe that we can stay with our traditional beliefs, taboos, knowledge, our science, and etc. So with this perennialism theory, I found it as a theory which can guide my study, since I was looking at the indigenous technology which has existed in the area for decades and decades. And then, since it does not believe in just a mere change, I realized that it was really a good theory to guide my study. As much as it guided my study, it had the criticisms, and one of them is where they are saying that the perennialism theory believes in conservatism, and it believes that the content is very weak. So in this case, the researcher did not agree with the criticism, because conservatism does not entirely mean that you are weak. And in this case, as much as they have stayed with the beliefs, traditions, skills, and tools which are indigenous, it does not mean that the people of Kibiro are weak or they cannot carry out anything. When I looked at the perennialism theory, I realized that it could not answer all the questions that I had. Therefore, I had to bring in the liberal feminism theory so that it can supplement, since the perennialism theory could not explain why this indigenous technology was in the hands of the women. The liberal feminism theory states, it was started by the feminist movement, and for it fights or it advocates for women's superiority, and it also believes that women can also do something better than men. In Kibiro, unlike in other areas, you'll find that it is only the women who are operating in these salt gardens. Therefore, I found it necessary to use the liberal feminism theory so as to explain the survival continuities and changes carried out by these women in the technology. Significance and justification of the study. Since we are in the time of technological change, this study is significant in a way that it gives evidence for the existence of indigenous technology and how the indigenous technology is very useful to the survival and the stay of the people in especially a dry area like Kibiro. It also contributes to the historiography of Bunyoro Chitara Kingdom. In this, you realize that with the Kibiro, which was a very important source of economy in Bunyoro Chitara Kingdom, if this history comes out clearly, it would be contributing to the historiography of the kingdom. This study also brings a scholarship about the centrality of women in state building. Since Kibiro is controlled by the women in the salt making, with this study, it brings out the role of the women in state building, especially the Bunyoro Chitara Kingdom, where they really had a bigger role in building the empire as a result of this indigenous salt making technology used in Kibiro. It also contributes to the documentation of a very unique practice that has survived over time. The unique practice I'm talking about is the indigenous technology itself. You realize that in 1997, Kibiro was enlisted on the UNESCO World Heritage Tentative List. And why it was enlisted, it was basically because of this unique practice, which is the indigenous technology carried out by the women, and it has shown the creativity of the women and also how they have managed to survive in this dry area where they cannot carry out agriculture. My study was guided by a historical research design together with a quantitative research approach. I used a historical research design because it can enable me, because it enables the researcher to collect data, especially on a behavior or a human behavior. When I look at Kibiro, people are involved in this technology, and with the historical research design together with the qualitative research approach, it gives the researcher an opportunity even to participate in the questioning study and also to have the face-to-face interaction with the people, together with carrying on the data or collecting the data from both the primary and the secondary sources. Using the primary sources, I used the archives, especially the archives from Hoima district, archives from the mountains of the Mon, archives from the National Archives, and also archives from Makerere and Chambogo libraries. In these archives, I came across the diaries of people like Sir Samuel Baker. I came across the minutes of Bunyoro Chitara Kingdom. I also came across some of the newspapers that could really guide the study. Together with the observation, I was able to collect a lot of data using even the oral history. The study population, I managed to interview 40 people. 40 people, 30 were women, and 5 of the women were the retired salt makers, and then the 25 were the active salt makers, and then 10 of the population were men. I specifically interviewed more women than men because the activity is carried out by the women. That's why I had to interview more women than the men. I used the purposive sampling technique and snowball and convenience, whereby with the purposive, I really interviewed those people who were in Kibiro and from 45 years and above, whom I believed that they had the information concerning the survival of the technology. Using the snowball, this is where, after getting the guide, the person could take me, especially to the Basimba women, who are believed to be the first women to stay in the area, and they knew what the technology was all about. Under the convenience, I could interview these people, some under appointments and some at their own convenience, where they could give you maybe come back at this time, or from the gardens or from their homes. Under the research instruments, I used an interview guide, and then the data processing and analysis. I actually used the manual way of analyzing data, and basically under the content analysis, where I could transcribe and then translate the information from the field into the different sub-themes and themes into the study. I carried out ethical clearance right from the department, then to the university. I also got clearance from the National Council for Science and Technology. Also got clearance from the RDCs and the LC of Kibiro Salt area. Under the objective 1, which is all about the role of Kibiro Salt in the organization of Bunyoro Chitara Kingdom. Kibiro Salt led to the building of the Abalusula Army. Before leading to the building of the Abalusula Army, Kibiro was put under Bunyoro Chitara Kingdom in the 1490s during the time of Omukama Rukidi. He basically took on the control of Kibiro, basically because of its salt. And when he took over, he used what we could call the indirect rule, where he used the chiefs to collect the salt and then take the salt to the kingdom. When they took the salt to the kingdom, this salt was exchanged into other weapons through the trade, and in this it helped to build the Abalusula Army, which Abalusula Army was very important in the development of Bunyoro Chitara Kingdom, and even later in the resistance during the time of Kabalega, when he was resisting the British rule. So it is because of the Kibiro salt that sustained Kabalega's resistance. When he was trying to resist the British, he could get the salt from Kibiro, then exchange that salt within the trade to get the modern weapons, which modern weapons he used to fight against the British. Kibiro salt was also used as a currency before the coming of the cowrie shows. People could exchange goods, and the currency they were using was the Kibiro salt, either in form of the cones or how many cones could be compared to the commodity that the person wanted. Kibiro salt also led to unity and marriage. Unity and marriage in a way that they could use the salt to unify the different societies and also to bring back the unity in case there were disagreements within the societies. For instance, we had an exchange of the Kibiro salt with Uganda, and also at the same time within the Kibiro salt, there is what led to the blood pact, whereby different traders could make a blood pact using the Kibiro salt, which made them to be brothers. And in this case, that blood pact or that brotherhood could bring the friendship and the unity within the people, which promoted the trade within the area. Kibiro salt also was used as taxes and tributes payment to the Bunyoro kingdom and also during the time of colonialism, whereby the women could produce the salt, give it to the men, use the men to pay the taxes or to pay the tributes to the kingdom. Then Kibiro salt has been so important as a domestic and a medicinal purpose. To the Bunyoro Chitara kingdom, the women used to take salt to the king as a way of giving him the salt to be used in the kingdom, but then at the same time, it was used as the medicinal value. If I can quote that, when I was interviewing some of the people from the kingdom, they feel they are missing that salt because some of them were saying, unlike during that time of Kabalega, today we have either to buy the salt to give to the king, or the women no longer just provide the salt for free. So that clearly indicated that the kingdom needed this salt for domestic and medicinal purpose. Under objective 2, which is explaining the indigenous salt technology practices, I look at Kibiro as an area with totally a unique method, which involves recycling this soil to produce the salt. And when they are carrying out the recycling, they are using indigenous skills, taboos, tools, and techniques to make the salt. So when I look at the indigenous salt, it involves, the indigenous salt making technology involves basically 4 stages. And in most cases, for the girls or for the women to learn these stages, it is transmitted on using the word of mouth from one woman to another. So discussing the stages of indigenous technology, I have the different tools used in the different stages. In this first one, I'm having a hoe, and usually that hoe is used in the first stage of the preparation of the garden, where they use it to remove the grass and then start a new garden. We have also the oroho. Oroho, it is that wooden boat-like tool which is used to carry the soils in the process. Within the roho, there is that metallic thing. It is called a chisinga, and this chisinga is used in the scrapping and the leaching stage. We have also the flying pan and the jerry can. The jerry can is used to carry the solution from the gardens to the homes, and then the flying pan is the one used in the boiling stage. Still under stage 1, there is that preparation. It is called the preparation of the new salt garden. This is where the women start now the technology or starting how to make the salt. The salt gardens are locally known as Echibuga. This first side, we are seeing that short grass. That is how Kibiro looks before starting making a salt garden. So using the hose, the women remove that grass and then start making the salt gardens. That heap of the soil indicates that already dry soil. Indicates the dry soil, which will later on be used in the leaching stage. On the other side, we have already the salt gardens being prepared. I have that lady because she requested to be part of the work. That's why she's in there. And by that time, she's done with preparing the salt garden, so she's leaving to another salt garden. Stage 2 is what we call the spreading, drying, and scraping the soil. In stage 2, usually the women use the oroho or that wooden boat-like tool, and they get the dry soils which are got from other salt gardens. They bring it, then pour or scatter it on the already prepared salt garden. These stones you see here, they act as the boundaries, and at the same time later on they are going to be used in another stage. There are those water streams in there. Those ones are coming from the Kabiga hot spring, which is the heart of Kibiro. They are ever warm and the water tastes as salt. So when the woman scatters that water on the ground, it is given 2 to 3 days depending on the weather. If it is a sunny day, it can take 2 days, and then the garden will show the white things on top or on the surface, which means that now the salt is ready for another stage. One side shows a lady from Kibiro and another side shows a researcher in participating in the stage. That is what we call okwabya. It starts with the spreading, and then later it is given time for the sun to also take its action through the drying. Later, the women use the singer, the metallic weapon, to scrap off the salt, the soils which will be used in the third stage. That is the third stage of soil making, which we call the leaching of the salt, or it is called kwitila or mwizilo. Usually omwizilo is the solution which is got after. In this other first thing, we see the saucepans, whereby some, for instance, the upper one, it is showing a saucepan. That saucepan, the big one, is called chikanigo. And then beneath it, there is a small saucepan which is called akaterekezo. The women, after scrubbing in the second stage, they get that salt which is already showing, they get the soils which are already showing salt, and then they bring them using the oroho, pour them in the saucepan, the upper one, or the chikanigo. When it is full, for instance, this lady in red is having another small saucepan to go and fetch water from the channels that they dig in the first stage. That water is mixed up with the soils in the saucepan. When they mix it, usually those saucepans are perforated, and then that is why we have the akatelekezo down or the small saucepan, so that as the leaching process is taking place, that water is poured or percolated through that small saucepan. The other lady in green, she's already taking the solution. She's taking the solution. So she's pouring the solution into the jerry cans to be taken at home. That is stage 4, which we call the boiling of the salty solution. When the women get the solution, usually that solution is kept at home for some days, from a week to 2 weeks. And they believe that the more they keep the solution, the more it increases the salt content. But at the same time, the researcher got to know that usually these women, since it is a daily activity, they have a lot of solution being kept at home. So they start with that one which was already kept and then keep on boiling. In the boiling stage, there must be firewood, and it usually takes 1 to 2 hours depending on how good the firewood is. Those cones you see aside, that is when already the salt is getting ready to be sold to the garden. Usually they boil and there is evaporation, which leaves the porridge-like thing. And that porridge-like solution is the one that they keep on pouring to make that particular cone. In the other picture, that is a researcher trying to get involved in the boiling situation. This is part of the salt, how it looks like when it is ready for the market. In that other slide, that is Kibiro salt ready for the market. These two ladies, usually with the Kibiro, the topography is not good. So the means of transport is usually by foot. Those women leave Kibiro very early in the morning, and they have to take the salt to the market that is in Chigolobia Trading Center. And their market day is usually Wednesday and Saturdays. On the other side, they are already in the market, and one of the research assistants is trying to bargain to get the salt. So looking at the objective 3, which is all about the survival of the indigenous salt, some of the factors are colonial and post-colonial policies. These colonial and post-colonial policies, for example, in the colonial government, especially in 1953, it came out with a policy, which policy was in transforming and helping the Katwe-Kassai salt works and not helping Kibiro salt works. This was after the tax that had been raised in Kibiro in 1952. Kibiro had raised less money compared to that of Katwe. So the colonial government came up with the policies, which policies were only in for helping Katwe and not Kibiro. This would sound as if it is negative, but it was a kind of a blessing for the survival of this technology, because these policies have not really exposed the Kibiro maybe to the outside community, which outside community could also maybe come up with other techniques to disorganize the indigenous technology. When we talk about the colonial policies and the post-colonial policies, even after colonialism, the governments that came after, for instance, the government of Amin also carried out improvement in Katwe and not improvement at Kibiro. That is where we see the local construction coming in to carry out construction at Katwe, and that is why for Katwe they are having both the modern and the indigenous technologies. But at the same time, these policies have denied the transport to this area. And since there is no transport means to reach the area, you realize that very few people go there and they couldn't really do much on the technology. Then there is also the geographic climate and the soils. With geography, Kibiro is blessed with the Kabinga hot spring. This is the heart of Kibiro, whereby they are able to get this water, and this water, as much as it is hot and warm, but at the same time it is salty. It is this water that they use in the leaching process, which brings out the solution as a salty solution and then later on used in the boiling system. At the same time, Kibiro is blessed with the salty soils. Their soils are salty, and it enables this indigenous technology to keep on. With the escarpment and the narrow plains, you find that Kibiro has a very sharp escarpment which cannot allow transport, but at the same time, Kibiro being located in a rain shadow area makes it not to have any other activity taking place but salt making. Then there is the role of the spiritual belief in Nyasimba. Nyasimba God actually is the God behind the indigenous salt technology. The people of Kibiro believe that the technology or the technological practices that they are carrying out were handed over to them by this Nyasimba God. With Nyasimba, this was the first woman to stay in Kibiro after coming with her husband. And when they stayed there, they got so many dreams. Some went to the man and others went to the woman. But when the woman got the dream, he was supposed to sacrifice a baby girl so as to stay in that particular area. Though they did not sacrifice at first, but the woman lost the pregnancy, and these people believe that after losing the pregnancy, the man got a dream which was asking him whether he had seen the power of the God. And in this dream, the God told him, I told you, you had to sacrifice for me if you are to stay in the area. Since you've not sacrificed for me, I decided to take your baby girl. Later on, the woman conceived another pregnancy, but in this they agreed, and the agreement was between the man, who is now the Musimba man, believing in the dream that if I get another child, I'll agree to sacrifice that child. When the woman produced, the man got the child and sacrificed that child at Motebere, that place there. When he sacrificed the child, that night the woman got a dream which gave him the entire stages of the indigenous technology. And this also basically explains why the men are not involved in the technology, but it is the women involved in the technology. Then the role of the women and their inheritance system. With the women, they are the people who carry on salt making. They are the people who control the salt making. They own these gardens. And in this case, there are no inheritance wars between the women to whom to own the garden, because they know that it is on the side of the matrilineal, and the women keep on passing the knowledge from one generation to another. So they have really played a big role in sustaining the technology. Then we have the role of the rituals, and under the rituals and the customs, we have one of sacrificing. When I talk of the Mukamila, That is a sacred place within Kibiro. It is a sacred place because that is where the first sacrifice took place. And on this sacrifice, they sacrificed 3 things. That is a girl and then 2 goats. The 2 goats, one had to come from the king and another one had to come from the chief. This started during the time of Kabalega, when he really wanted to stop the sacrifice of a girl or of human beings. But still the people, especially the Basimba people, believed that that was not a communication between the women and their Nyasimba god. So they kept on going on with the sacrifice of human beings. Though today this has changed, but still the Basimba women believe that though they don't practically carry out the sacrifice, Nyasimba god still sacrifices for herself. And this is where they are saying that every year at least one woman or a girl dies within the salt gardens, or he dies at the Mtebile place, which is also a sacred place where they could always sacrifice the people from there. So these people still believe that it is a sacrifice which has kept or which has led to the survival of the technology. There are also rituals where they believe that one is not supposed to play sex within the salt gardens, and this has kept the salt gardens as sacred places, leading to the continuation of the technology. Then the enlistment of the Kibiro Salt Gardens on the UNESCO World Heritage Tentative List in 1997 has also increased their love and morale and interest in their technology. These people believe that they were recognized in the world since they were put on the World Tentative List, and this has enabled them to continue love their technology. And then there is also the existence of the market. Since these people make the salt and people are able to buy it, it enables them to continue with the technology. In my conclusions, which are based on the objective, I conclude by saying that Kibiro salt was so important in state formation, especially during the time of Bunyoro Chitara Kingdom. And I also conclude by saying that the indigenous technology, which involves the 4 stages, they need each other for them to make the salt. Therefore, they cannot do without any of the 4 stages. I also conclude by emphasizing the role of spiritual beliefs, the role of women, and the geographical reasons that are very important in the continuity of the technology. My study recommends about the preservation of Kibiro and its knowledge. Why I recommend about the preservation of Kibiro? During the time of interviews, Kibiro is under threat, especially after the discovery of the oil in the area. People believe that they are going to be displaced and their technology is going to die as they are being displaced. So I recommend that they can preserve Kibiro with its technology and knowledge alongside other developments. I also recommend for infrastructure development so that Kibiro can continue produce the salt, but when people can easily reach the area and when they can also get market without traveling about 5 kilometers to Chigolobia. There is need to sensitize the people of Kibiro, especially when it comes to the 4th stage, where they are using the firewood to carry out the boiling, that since firewood is scarce, they can use coal and maybe still continue with their indigenous technology. I recommend the blending of both technologies in the community, that is the indigenous technology and the modern technologies, especially when it comes to the packing, so that these people can be able to pack their salt and it can be taken by the people easily. I also recommend that let Kibiro be now enlisted on the World Heritage Site list other than being on a tentative list. With that work, I have been able to come up with 2 publications. One has been published, that is Kibiro Indigenous Salt Making Technology and Uganda's Economic War. It has been published by the African Journal of History and Geography. And then another one, Exploring the Role of Women at Kibiro Salt Gardens. It is under review with the Journal of Historical Association. I acknowledge and appreciate the support given to me by Geda Enkel Foundation, especially under our coordinator, Dr. Edgar Nabutanyi, Dr. Levis, Madam Esther and Duncan. Thank you so much. I also appreciate the support given by Andrew Meron Foundation under Dr. Pamela. Thank you so much. It enabled me to come up with that paper that has been published. I thank my mentors, Professor Kyazike and Dr. Pamela. Thank you so much. I thank Department of History, Archaeology and Heritage Studies, Makerere University, whereby every now and then Dr. Shaud would ask, when are you presenting? When are you presenting? Those questions have enabled me to come far. Thank you so much. I also thank my mother department, that is History Department of Kyambogo University. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I thank my COVID cohort members. You are safe. That is Fatuma, Maureen, Naomi, Sam, and others. Thank you. Thank you so much. My family and friends, those who have been in this journey, thank you so much. My research team, I expected one to be here, but I think he has failed. Thank you so much. And lastly, I thank the Banyakibiro people who accepted to participate in the study, which has yielded those findings. Thank you.
I think give another round of applause. I'd like to welcome you back from Kibiro Salt Mines. And now would like to thank you for the presentation and ask our independent reader, Dr. Juliet Mugisa, to take you on. He's a specialist in gender and livelihoods as well as conservation. So you're very welcome, Dr. Mugisa.
Yes, good morning, everyone. Juliet, thank you. I know it has been a lonely journey, not so? I know you must have sacrificed a lot to reach this far. I wish you well. I happen to have read your work. It was very interesting. However, there are some gray spaces that you have to clear now. Yeah, I did not understand them, so I came up with some few questions. One, can we have the topic? Yeah, indigenous salt making technology at Kibiro Gardens in Western Uganda, 1894 to 1997. Why this period?
I chose 1894 because of two reasons. One, in 1894, Emily Pasha and Colville attacked Kibiro Salt Gardens, destroyed them, and then after 2 weeks they had to leave, and the Kibiro people came back and continued with their technology. So that is one of the reasons why I chose 1894. But at the same time, 1894 is the time when Uganda is declared a British protectorate. Well, 1997, I chose that year because that is when Kibiro is recognized worldwide and it is put on the UNESCO World Heritage Tentative List. Thank you so much.
But this is a period. It is a long period, so you had to explain the periods. Okay, we shall say that. Then next, what comes into your mind when you say indigenous salt making technology at Kibiro Gardens? To me, it looks like a statement. Why did you analyze? Does the topic or the title speak to what you analyzed? Do you get the point, the question? Yeah, it is indigenous salt making technology at Kibiro. Then the question is, so what? Why did you want to look up?
In the analysis under indigenous salt making technology, I looked at its continuities, its changes, and the survival. What exactly has led to this survival of the technology besides the modern technology?
Yes, the point is, do you still want to maintain that topic? Because to me, it seems that you left out some. You have been talking about the women's involvement. So did you want to communicate the involvement? Did you have been comparing it, you have been making it a comparative study with the Katwe and the rest? Is it a comparative study? Or did you, what did you want to look at exactly?
In this study, I looked at the survival of this technology.
Okay, good. But what I expected was probably you'd have given why the indigenous salt making technology has survived at Kibiro Gardens, such that you give the reasons you have been giving. It has survived because of certain reasons or factors. So it would have been good to make the topic more talking. Okay, like it could be either technological and cultural aspects of indigenous salt making, such that someone gets to know that you were teasing certain variables. Okay, next. In chapter 1, that is the general introduction, you give technological resistance. But the question is, why has the Kibiro salt makers resisted adopting modern salt technologies?
Why have the Kibiro persisted with the technology? It is basically explained by the belief in the Nyasimba God and the geography of the area.
Good. You have answered it because it's the beliefs, not so. Thank you. Now we go to the problem statement. You have ably said, or you argue, that the indigenous salt making technology at Kibiro has survived despite advancements in modern salt production. Could you clarify the specific mechanisms or reasons that you believe explain this survival?
I beg your pardon.
In the problem statement, you clearly state or argue that the indigenous salt making technology at Kibiro has survived despite advancements in modern salt production. Right? Then, could you please clarify the specific mechanisms or reasons that you believe explain this survival?
When I talk about the modern technologies, I'm saying that people are using tractors or the drilling when they are making salt. But with the Kibiro, they are only using the simple tools and the indigenous technology. And the main reasons as to why they are using this, it is because of the role of the women, their geography, and the Ssematimba god, which has enabled them to continue carrying on this technology.
Good. Next. Still in the problem statement, you assert that technology has somehow affected, or modernity has somehow affected the technologies being used at Kibiro. Can you elaborate on the degree to which modern technologies have influenced salt mining at Kibiro? Has Kibiro been influenced by modernity?
Basically, looking at the technology of Kibiro, it has not been influenced by modernity.
Okay.
They are still using indigenous.
Okay. Then next. You mentioned, still in the problem statement, that salt making at Kibiro has persisted for centuries, but the reasons behind this continuity remain unclear. Are there any specific historical events, such as colonialism and state policies, that might have contributed to the resistance of this practice?
Yes, they are there. That is why when I'm talking about objective number 3, which talks about the survival, I clearly put the colonial policies, and under some of the colonial policies, I'm looking at the policy of mines providing taxes to the colonial government. But when it reached the year 1952, they compared the revenue or the taxes from Kibiro with that of Katwe. And when they realized that the revenue from Katwe was more than that of Kibiro, they opted to improve Katwe and not to improve the technology at Kibiro. So such a policy, which was to neglect Kibiro, led to the survival of its technology.
Okay, good. But still, on technological adaptation and innovation, you mentioned that although technology has remained largely unchanged, I'm quoting your words, although technology has remained largely unchanged, or maybe let me rephrase it. Are there other subtle innovations and adaptations within the indigenous salt making technologies that have been adopted?
With the indigenous technology at Kibiro, under the stages, they have not adopted changes, but they have been able to adopt changes in terms of the tools used. That is when from the pottery tools, they started using the saucepans or the metallic tools. And at the same time, we see them also using the plastic tools. So those are some of the changes within.
So would you continue to assert that it has not changed? Technology has not changed? Okay, we continue. Can we have the specific objectives? Good. The first or the main is to examine changes and continuities of indigenous salt making technology at Kibiro and how it has shaped Bunyoro Kitara Kingdom. Then my question comes in that this objective is examining changes and continuities in indigenous salt making practice at Kibiro, specifically focusing on the persistence and role in shaping Bunyoro Kitara Kingdom. How do you define it to shape? How do you define the word or the concept shape?
In this study, the concept shape is examined under the specific role number 1, where I look at the role of Kibiro salt in the political, economic, and social shaping of the Bunyoro Kitara Kingdom. How did the salt contribute to the organization of Bunyoro Kitara politically, economically, and socially?
Now, can we go to the topic? So would I be right to say that you are looking at the contribution of salt to Bunyoro Kitara Kingdom?
You would be right, but that would mean that it is only one objective, and yet the study has more than one objective. I looked at more than just the role, but the technology itself.
So the question is, do you see that general objective in the topic? Okay, we continue. We go to objective, the specific objective 1. You mentioned that Kibiro salt played a role in the organization of the Bunyoro Kitara Kingdom before colonialization, or before colonialism. Could you provide more clarity on the exact nature of this role?
With the Kibiro salt, the kings of Bunyoro, for example, Kabalega, used to acquire Kibiro salt, and when he acquired this salt, he could exchange it and get the modern weapons, for instance, the guns, which guns he used in the resistance of colonialism in the kingdom.
Good, still that takes us to the contribution. True?
Yes.
Okay. Objective 2, specific objective 2. I see that it is indigenous technology and the stages of salt production. Was your study analyzing the stages of salt production or the technology in salt production?
Thank you so much. For the study to understand the technology, as I'm using the word indigenous soul technology to mean the practices, the art, the science, the skills, the tools, and the stages involved. That's why I came up with objective number 2, so that I'm able to explain what exactly is involved in this indigenous technology. And that is how I had to analyze and explain the stages that are involved.
Do they use different technologies at different stages, or at all stages they use the same technologies?
If I can pick out some of the elements of indigenous technology at every different stage, for instance, they are using different knowledge when they are carrying out these stages. They are using different tools, and even the skills are different in the carrying, in the making of this salt in these different stages.
Thank you. That is good. That's right. That's why I wanted to know whether different tools were used at different stages. That's all. It lacked even in the presentation, but it was in the report, so I had to bring it out. I wanted you to explain on it. Specific objective 3. It is on the survival, continuities, and the changes in indigenous salt making technology at Kibiro. By the way, how do you define indigenous in your study?
I looked at indigenous as the local knowledge or the local practices or traditions, tools that have an impact or a relevance to the people to survive in a particular experience and environment.
So indigenous, it involved also the tools that were made from within the area, Bunyoro Kitara?
Yes.
Okay, good. Third objective still, you talked about surviving, meaning the survival, discussing the survival and the continuities and the changes in indigenous salt making technology, particularly during the colonial period. How did you balance the historical perspective with the technological evolution of salt making over time?
Using the primary sources that I used to collect the data, this is how it enabled me to collect the data that showed that survival over the time.
So would I be right to say that you are focusing on how the technology has remained the same, or
Yes.
how it has evolved in response to external factors? So if you looked at the continuities, the survival and the changes, how did you analyze the changes vis-a-vis the, like we can talk of staggeredness?
Thank you so much. I looked at the changes within the technology basing on other technologies. For instance, when I was reading, I came across different technologies being used to make salt. And that is why I had to check and see if at Kibiro it is indigenous salt making technology. Since the time these people started making salt, has this technology changed in anything? For instance, has it changed in terms of the stages? Has it changed in terms of the skills? Has it changed in terms of the tools? Or has it changed in terms of the knowledge? That's what I was basing.
Thank you. And that's how it is in your report. Now we move to methodology. It was your chapter 2. methodology. Okay. Given the historical and the technological focus of your study, how did you ensure that your research is both historically grounded and contextually relevant to the current debates on the preservation of indigenous technology?
I ensured this.
I repeat the question.
Yes.
Where I'm not clear, please you ask. I'm saying that given the historical and the technological focus of your study, how did you ensure that your research is both historically grounded and contextually relevant to the current debates on the preservation of indigenous technologies?
Using the historical research design, which enables the researcher to analyze the past in relation to understand the current situation. I use the historical research in collecting the data, which data was also coming from the past, but at the same time, I would relate it with what the people are saying to see whether it is really historical and it is viable to be used in the study. Under the preservation, that is why it is also coming out in the recommendations where I'm saying using the importance of this indigenous salt making technology, which is in the study. I believe the policymakers can use it to have Kibiro remaining as an indigenous salt making site, preserving other developments.
Okay, good. Another question. You intended to examine continuities and changes during the colonial period. True? Is it true? That you intended to examine continuities and changes during the colonial period. Now, my question is, how did the colonial forces directly influence local community practices in salt making technologies?
During the time of colonialism and during the time of the establishment of colonial rule in Bunyoro, the colonialists realized that it was the Kibiro salt that was giving a lot of power to Kabalega. That's why in 1894, people like Emily Pasha together with the Colville attacked the area so that they are able to weaken Kabalega, since this was the source of the salt that he was using to exchange and getting weapons, which weapons he was using to fight them. So these colonial forces simply occupied the area. But since these people were using the indigenous technology, the colonial forces did not really understand how to use them to carry on the salt. And that is why later on we see them leaving the area and only influencing this area by putting or forcing them to pay tax, which was still equivalent to their salt. Later on, we see them taking the salt to the colonial governments as a way of influencing. So practically, the colonial forces did not influence the indigenous practice of the salt at the area.
Okay. Then you mentioned that women play a very big role in salt production. In simple terms, that you highlight the role of women in salt production. But did you analyze, why didn't you analyze how, or the power dynamics between the men and the women in influencing salt production at Kibiro? Okay. Can we understand whether you, or did you bother to unearth the gender dynamics that influenced the survival of the indigenous technology in terms of labor, division of labor, decision making, either at the household level or it could be at the kingdom level? Did they participate in salt production because culture assigned them that role and the men were in another? Because in your book, you say that you articulate it very well that men were involved in fishing, while women were involved in salt production or mining. So, was it a gender division of labor, or can you explain?
Thank you so much. If I'm to examine in terms of gender, even in the book, there is somewhere where I say under the taboos that the men take it as a taboo for them to get involved in salt making. They believe that this is a women activity and they base their belief on the Nyasimba god. They believe that the Nyasimba was a woman since they sacrificed a woman. So they believe that since this god who came in form of a dream asked for a sacrifice of a woman and gave the stages of the technology to the woman and not the man, it is the role of the woman to carry out salt and the men participate in other activities. Then on the side of decision making at the kingdom, the Kibiro women did not influence any decision making at the kingdom, despite the fact that they could donate the salt to the king. Thank you.
Thank you. I think before we go to methodology, let's still go to the theoretical framework. Okay. I see you used that, you use that theory to explain the survival and the continuity of indigenous technology at Kibiro. Can you clarify how you distinguished between enduring cultural elements and those that may have evolved or adapted over time? Are there some technologies that have remained constant and there are those which have changed? We have had a number of events. I asked it at the start. Colonialism, we have the state formation. Uganda became an independent country. So during that time, how those events, we have the Idi Amin regime you mentioned in your book. Now, the question is, can you let us know which ones have remained unchanged and those which have changed, which technologies have changed?
The 4 stages involved in the technology, that is the preparation, the spreading and lynching, and then the boiling, have remained in the same way that they started this technology during the time of the Nyasimba, giving them instructions. What has entirely changed within these technologies are the tools that are being used by the women to carry on.
Thank you. That's what I wanted, because you say, because tools are part of technology. That's why a bit particular on, has technology remained the same? Or the stages have remained the same? So that one, it's okay. Next question. This perennialism theory has been critiqued for emphasizing conservation or conservativeness and resisting change. In light of this critique, how did you respond to the possibility that some of the indigenous salt-making practices may have adapted to modern contexts?
In my study, I totally disagreed with the criticism to perennialism theory, where they are saying that if you don't adapt change, then you are being conservative. To me, conservatism does not believe that you don't believe in change. And change does not entirely mean that you're modern. That is why with the women of Kibiro, where they would adapt change, they had to adapt it, for example, from changing from the pots to the use of saucepans and the plastics. But they believed in unchanging their beliefs, their practices, their skills, and their knowledge. And because of that, they have been able to keep on producing the salt, which salt is the source of their livelihood in the area. So it doesn't entirely mean that when I don't change, I'm conservative. That is, I did not agree with the criticism.
Okay. Before I go to another question, where you disagreed with the criticism, what did you do?
Where I disagreed with the criticism, I went on to use what the perennialism theory advocates for. And in this case, that is why I had to complement the perennialism theory with the liberal feminism.
Yes, that's what I wanted. The liberal feminist theory. That's why you brought it. The weaknesses of the perennialism theory were solved somehow with the introduction of this second theory. Now, this theory of the liberal feminism emphasize addressing inequalities. Not so? It advocates for rights of women and other disadvantaged categories. Now, the question, could you clarify how you investigated gender relations and how women's roles in salt production specifically contribute to the maintenance and the transformation of indigenous technology?
The role of the women contributes to the continuity of the technology in a way that the women take the salt making practice as their role, as their work, as the only source of the livelihood. But at the same time, when the women carry on this salt making technology, they believe that they own these gardens. And even the inheritance of the gardens is still on the side of the matrimonial side, where woman to a woman. This has led to no conflicts within owning the salt gardens, since the men are not involved in either the work or in the ownership of the gardens. And in this case, there is that piece which leads to the continuation of the technology.
Okay. Did you find all the women the same? Were women homogeneous? The question is, if women were not the same, what differences, or why didn't you use the intersectionality theory to bring out those intersections or the statuses like marital status, level of education, how they affected adoption of the surrogate making technologies, but it wasn't part of yesterday. Yeah, in the interest of time, I will leave some of the questions. I move to methodology briefly because I'm told that I have only 5 minutes. I have 5 minutes, so let me go to. I have to skip some of the questions I had prepared. Now, given that, I good. Okay. Yeah, I can leave the sampling. Now I come to data collection challenges. I remember you asserting that you interviewed old people. True? Now, if you interviewed old people, I think these old people have already started losing their memory. Not so? How do we, or convince us to believe your findings because you are told by old people, very old people?
It is not basically that all of them were very old people, because I started with the age of 45, and the oldest there was 107 years. With the woman of 107 years, I kept on visiting her, and from the conversations, I could keep on picking the important data. And as I interview the very old, and I also interview from the 45, the information got from the very old could be the same information got from these people. And some of these ones will tell you, my grandmother taught me this or told me this. For instance, the story of Ssematimba, which clearly really showed that it was true information.
Okay. Then somewhere you also mentioned that you reached saturation level. Also, how did you determine the saturation level?
I determined the saturation level after getting similar data, similar information from whoever I could continue interviewing.
Good. So in the interest of time, let me go to the recommendations. Let us move to the recommendations. Okay. Somewhere in your book, I know these are summarized. You mention or you emphasize the central role of women in maintaining sorority practices. How do you see that? How do you view or see the future of women's leadership in the industry, since the younger generation is not involved in sorority mining? Your pictures did not show that. No, in the book, do not show that you interviewed any younger one. And you mentioned that many of the educated younger children are not involved in sorority mining. So how do you see the future of Kibiro sorority mining?
Actually, I did not interview the young generation. I started with 45, basically because of the nature of the study. because I was looking at changes, continuities, and the survival. So I believed from 45 they had the knowledge.
So where do you see the future?
I see the future of this technology still cropping up in the young children. Within the study, I indicate clearly that the young girls start getting the knowledge, the skills that govern this technology from the years of 10. That is when they are instituted into the activity. Meaning that from the age of the 10, these girls are learning how to make the salt at Kibiro.
Okay, thank you. I think I can stop there.
Thank you so much.
Let's put our hands together again for the independent reader. I would like to ask that we shift you to the other panelists, and with your permission, members, can we ask her to sit? Is that okay? Yeah, so I think you sit here and then we can ask the panelists. I would like to start with Dr. Kagorovia.
Thank you very much, Chair. And thank you very much, Dr. Julius Mugisa, for the job well done. Congratulations, Juliet, for coming this far.
Thank you.
You talked about the salt mining, indigenous salt mining, being done at Kibiro, being done by only women. And then I was wondering, and also the religious beliefs of the people there. Then I was wondering, what can happen to a man if he participates in the salt mining? What are the beliefs or philosophies of the people there?
These people believe that it is a taboo for a man to carry on salt making.
Mm-hmm.
And basically there is only one, I can call him a teenager, but this boy is actually mentally disturbed, and is the only person who goes into those salt gardens, but he does not involve himself in the making of the salt.
Okay, so maybe we needed to give us more about their beliefs, the punishment from the God, what they believe and what is holding up men not to participate in the salt mining. Then also, you talked about the human sacrifices that have been going on maybe at the very beginning of the incubation of the salt mining. But we are aware that maybe governments all over the world are against human sacrifice. And if I'm not mistaken, and since you're a historian, you remind me, I think there's also the Anti-Witchcraft Act or law. Was it 1912 or thereabout, which was enacted by the colonial government? So tell me, didn't they interfere when maybe they had word went around that they were engaged in human sacrifice?
Maybe because of the location of Kibiro, practically they have not been interrupted by these acts, but it is more of the religion, especially Christianity, that has tried to encourage them not to continue with the human sacrifice. And that is why to them they believe that practically they are not sacrificing the human beings, but for them they believe that their God continues to sacrifice for herself. And they give you evidence by saying that every year there must be either a young girl or a woman dying within the salt gardens. And since this person dies instantly or without knowing the cause, to them they believe that yes, their God has sacrificed that person.
Okay, so you need to interrogate more that governmental policies and the effects on indigenous cultural practices. For example, whereas in the performing arts, we know that government policies interfere with the performing arts. For example, you can, if I can give one example, the Monta lizard used to be used for to make drums, the wrong drum or the ngalabi. But now with the Wildlife Act, it is prohibited for you to kill what? The Monta lizard. So even though it's a cultural practice, but these government policies can put a stop to those cultural practices. So how do those cultural practices survive vis-a-vis the national laws or even international what? Laws? So investigate that and talk more about that. Yes, I think Dr. Mugisha talked about it because I was also wondering about the instructions from the God. You have, because that's the backdrop at the very beginning of everything. If you are to investigate or interrogate the continuities and changes, you say to the methods and stages of salt mining were given by this God what? Ssematimba. So that's at the very beginning we have to have that. What were the instructions from the God? Is that clear? Maybe the God gave the different stages of salt mining, and maybe the equipment to be used was doing the salt what? Mining. If you are to interrogate the continuities and changes, that's our what? Backdrop. And then we trace the changes and what? Continuities. But then after that, I was wondering that given the current changes, is the God still speaking? And is the God happy about those changes and the technologies that have faced the salt mining up to now? Did you interrogate that?
Yes, these people believe that they still communicate to their God.
Mm-hmm.
And that is why they still respect the taboos and the customs of the area, so that when they respect them, the salt, there is increase in the salt.
Okay. But you said there are changes, maybe which are veering away from the instructions of the gods at the very beginning. So are there spirit mediums that are still communicating with the God, and is the God happy? So you need to also interrogate that aspect.
The changes in terms of the tools being used,
Okay.
but not in the instructions. And still these people believe that the Simba clan, the women from the Simba clan, are the mediums between them and the spirit of Nyasimba.
Okay. Then there's also recently, I think I was reading an article in one of the newspapers where they're talking about the effects of salt mining on women. And some were saying that they are turning out to be barren. Some have sores on their feet and all that. Did you also interrogate those effects of salt mining on the women? Maybe.
At Kibiro, they don't have those effects.
Sure?
Yes.
Okay, good. Then my last one. You talked about the recommendations. Are they the ones? Aha, those are the ones. Now you talk about blending both technologies in the what? New technology maybe in the salt mining. And then again, lastly, you say it should be fully enlisted on the World Heritage List. Isn't it a contradiction? You are saying there should be continuation over the indigenous practices, and then you are recommending blending with technology, and then you are saying at the same time it should be put on the World Heritage List.
Thank you, Doctor. The blending, I talked about the blending, especially in terms of the packing.
Okay.
When I look at this salt, it is very hard for you to move with it from Kibiro to here when it has not changed the shape. So I say that if they are to blend, this indigenous technology of making the salt can remain, but these people can at least adapt the modern way of packing the salt, which can enable them even get more market than it is.
Okay, thank you very much. I
Thank
rest
you.
my case.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Kagorovia, and with your permission, would like to let him go and start an exam. I would like to now invite Dr. Martin Chamanywa to please take on the candidate.
Thank you, Chair, and congratulations, Juliet,
Thank you.
upon this achievement so far. One, you are talking about indigenous salt making technologies at Kibiro, and you're talking about time period 1894 to 1997. But in your methodology, you mentioned that you interviewed women who are currently involved in the work. So how sure are you that they are giving you information, that's relevant to this time period?
Thank you, Doctor. As much as I interviewed women who are currently taking on the making of the salt, I basically looked at the age. That is when I started with women from 45 years of age onwards. And this could also be complemented by the information got from those retired salt makers.
Okay. You say that Kibiro is in a rain shadow. Would you like to throw more light on what you mean by rain shadow?
Kibiro being in the Albertine Lift, it is in a rain shadow area where it is very dry and it receives very little rainfall, which cannot sustain agriculture in that place. So in Kibiro, there is no farming, there is no growing of crops, but basically producing salt, which they exchange for food. That's what I meant by being in a rain shadow area.
Okay. Now, you tell us that this salt work is a preserve for the women. So, how do the men survive?
The men basically carry out fishing on Lake Albert. That's how they survive.
Do they also share in the proceeds from salt works? Do the men benefit from the sweat of their women?
Yes, they do. Because when you interview them, some of them even say that because they take it to be a taboo, they cannot participate, but the women were economically benefiting compared to what they were benefiting from the fish, from the fishing, especially that the army is controlling the lake.
Okay. Now, in your recommendations, you talk about use of coal instead of firewood. Did I get you right? Is there a coal in Kibiro?
I can look into that, Doctor.
Okay, thank you. And finally, how relevant is your study to the Sustainable Development Goals?
My study is relevant because when it talks of preservation of a heritage site, it falls under the sustainable goal number 11, which calls upon the people to preserve and conserve cultural sites.
Okay, thank you.
A hand clap for Dr. Chamanywa. I would now like to invite Dr. Balijira to please take the candidate on.
Thank you, Chair, and I congratulate you for having reached this level.
Thank you, Doctor.
Yeah, I have some few comments here and questions. I will begin from the word making. How do you understand the word making, and how did you use it in what? In your research?
I use the word making in my research basically to mean the use of the hands when they are producing the salt.
And what do you understand by the word processing? Because I know there is already salt in Kibiro. The salt is there, is found there, but is processed. Why didn't you use such words?
Doctor, I can look into that.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, and then I can talk about something which others have talked about related to the period of time. In your writings, in this thesis, or there is where you have indicated something like you are trying to find out why the salt technology continues to endure. And for me, I think that only implies that you have to change the what? The title. Although you have what? Remained adamant in changing the title. You have defended it. Certainly you have to what? To change the title. Because you have used those statements and really you have indicated some data on the techniques even after 1997. So why don't you open up and say since 1894 instead of locking yourself?
I'll try to discuss that with the supervisors and see how to change it.
Okay, thank you very much. I've realized, I've noted some errors in your what? Thesis. There are many. You may require what? Extensive what? Editing. For example, right from the abstract, line 3. You look at line 3. Yeah, even page 1. You check on page 1. Line 3 also. You have repeated some words. You see what is there? What words are there? What have you repeated? Line 3, page 1. Have you seen the words you have repeated? Yeah. And those are just examples. I looked at the whole thesis. I realized there were so many errors. So you will do what? Extensive editing. There is somebody who was asking you why does or why is it difficult to practice agriculture in that place? There is something you missed, which would give you what? An explanation. These soils in Kibiro, because I've also been there, they are saline. They are saline. That means they have a lot of what? Salt. And it's very difficult to what? To grow what? Crops there. That's the reason you would have given. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Clap for Dr. Balijira. I'd like now to invite Dr. Zaid to give his views.
Thank you, Chair. And Juliet, congratulations for coming this far.
Thank you, Doctor.
It's a very interesting piece, relevant in the sense that first and foremost, it highlights the place of women in the socioeconomic transformation of pre-colonial, colonial, and perhaps part of the post-colonial livelihoods of the people of Bunyoro, and that is a plus. Two, the current debate, like I think Dr. Mugisha highlighted, the issue of preservation of indigenous technology, but how they have survived over the years. This is pertinent, and pertinent in a sense that it's coming. All we are struggling to preserve in the midst of the tension is from the West, where these technologies need to be adopted. Three is on the relevance of the traditional industrial manufacturing complexes and how these have helped to promote cultural resilience. You have highlighted the relevance of traditional salt. Unfortunately, I wished to hear you bring out the issue of the nexus between indigenous salt and the issue of virility. It is very key, and it's a point that if you had read A.G. Hopkins, An Economic History of West Africa, though not on East Africa, but it's a very key reading on this area, this in traditional industrial manufacturing, and this is in any way, we are talking of making, it would help perhaps. Now, that aside, I have a few reservations. One, today, the concept artisanal from artisan is more used than indigenous. And we're having those that they are calling artisanal salt miners. And with you are calling indigenous salt miners or salt mining technology, whichever. How different are the two? Maybe you can just take note and you answer it. That is one. Two, your objective number 3 with what Dr. Mugisha was raising, assuming we reworked our title to be survival, continuities, and changes in the indigenous salt mining industrial complex in Bunyoro, perhaps, because where you are capturing the role, the technologies, everything, all those changes, continuities are embedded within. In fact, objective 3 is a replica of your main objective, in my view. So if we reworked, would it affect our work? 3, was it by default or that you skipped. All studies on socio-economic transformation in one way or the other borrow something from the work of RMA, Zwanenberg, and Anne King, an economic history of Kenya and Uganda. He captures so well these transformations, this socio-economic transformation in Bunyoro. Don't you think if you had paid attention to this, it would help to improve your work? 3, on page 64 of your work, there is something that you write. You said your time scope is 1894 to 1997, isn't it? And what was your reason for choosing 1894?
I chose 1894 because this is when Emily Pasha and Colville attacked Kibiro Salt Gardens, destroyed them, and then later when they left, the
But
people of
this
Kibiro
is
came.
very contrary to what you have on page 64. You can read. However, during the reign of Omkama Kabariga, who was born in 1853 and ruled Bunyoro Kitara from 1869 to 1899, the forces of the British colonies attacked the mines of salt at Kibiro, conquered and occupied Kibiro salt gardens with the aim of controlling and exploiting the salt deposits. Note that the attack on Kibiro salt mines was executed by the Sudanese British Army under the command of Emily Pasha in 1886.
Why I have that year there, Kibiro was attacked twice, 1886 and 1894.
Very good. Then why did you choose 1894 and not 1886? Because the second attack which you mentioned on page 65, you say, however, on the night of the 17th of January 1894, approximately 100 soldiers under the command of Major R. Owen attacked and captured Kibiro without any resistance from the forces of the Empire of New York. The Brits, however, you said on the 20th, that is when officially occupied, but what their expectations were not what they actually found on the ground, and consequently, they seem to have left the place. Meaning the one of 1886 was more pertinent and should have been your starting point and not this. Maybe you can look at that. Maybe you can look at that. Then another issue. In 1902, if you read Zwanenberg and Anne King, it was discovered that salt mining had an impact on the health of men, and consequently, this confirmed the traditional notion that men should not be venturing. The process is very dangerous to men. Very dangerous to men. It is very hazardous to the men. So the government, the colonial government at that time ruled that let men completely be out of. And it was also the very reason why in 1894, after noticing it, they said, no, we should pull out of this. Perhaps you can visit those sources. So it became a preserve of women because it was less dangerous to women than it was. But the product is again very relevant and of high value to the men. But the process, just talking out of that. So that the concept of manliness must actually come out. You talked about, on your objective number 2, you talk about stages. Do these stages, different stages, come along with different products? Maybe you'll answer that also. Another thing, who owns these salt spans. The question of ownership. Who owns these salt spans? Because continuity and survival could be because they are owned by the individuals. Otherwise, if the government wants change and they're owned by the government, then it is easy to sweep away these technologies.
Doctor, I would request if I can answer some of the questions.
Lastly, don't mind. Lastly, this is an issue that you need to take into consideration. Your references are repeated here and there. So it is an issue that can spoil the very good piece if one says sees many things repeated here and there. Chair, I submit.
Thank you, Doctor. The first question was about artisan versus indigenous. I'm using the word indigenous and not artisan, simply because with the artisan, these are more of man-made. But when I look at Kibiro, to me, I take it to be indigenous because the stages that they are basing on are not man-made, but they are actually spiritual made, or they were got in form of a dream. It is only the tools that they acquire as a result of man-making. And in most cases, when we talk about the artisan salt making, this is when we refer to those skills, beliefs, attitudes that are simply made by man. Then about the ownership at Kibiro, they are not salt pans, they are salt gardens. And these ones are owned by women. There is no man who owns a salt garden in Kibiro.
I think you can deal with the rest as we continue. May I ask Dr. Edgar to take on the candidate?
So thank you very much for this really interesting thesis, and congratulations on reaching this point. I just have a couple of questions, and one is informational. But who is or what is Nyasimba? You've referred to it both as a god, as a spirit. It's not the same. It's not Ruhanga. Like, is this a god that is specific to certain people, or a spirit that is only worshipped by certain people? And if so, what is the? I think I'd like to hear a bit more about what this god represents, particularly because you've talked about, and in the thesis you write about Kibiro being, and in fact, it's not just you; it's the whole literature that I was scanning through as during this discussion. Often talks about it in economic terms, that it has an economic significance because salt was paid as tribute to the king. But I wonder what is like if. And so often it's seen as an appendage to Bunyoro Kingdom, that the women had local power over salt making, but really they were subservient to the kingdom. But I wonder if the spiritual dimension might tell a more complicated story. Is it only women who worship Nyasimba? I have no idea. I'm just asking. Do the women there claim that? In fact, I saw that. I think was it Catherine Barrett Gaines said that she interviewed people who from further south, even though Katwe salt was more common, they would seek out Kibiro salt because it was thought to cure certain diseases or ailments. So I'm sort of fishing around for the idea, is there any healing discourse about the work that the women are doing at Kibiro? I don't know, it might not be there. But I think that might be a way of thinking about what these women's power was that's not only economic. That did they exert, especially before the 1890s, did they exercise any? Did the production of salt did it have a spiritual significance? What we might call spiritual significance today, that actually was in tension sometimes with the power of the king. So this is a literature by scholars of healing like Stephen Fireman and Neil Kodesh and others, who argue that often women who could make claims to healing were often had a major center of power that was sometimes aligned with kings, but sometimes not. And I wonder if there's something to say about why women are continuing to practice this today is not just a defense of quote unquote culture, but is a way of defending a longer history of their power. And so the irony is that's a question about, and I don't know, maybe I'm on the wrong path there. But I think that opens up, my other question is partly about the recommendations and how Kibiro is interpreted today. I'm sort of worried by the recommendation that the women of Kibiro need to be sensitized to make more money, as if what they're doing is solely, as if they knew better, they could make more money by packaging it a certain way or something. Because I'm not quite convinced I'm not convinced at all really that the reason why this tradition has continued, and I think I'm accepting your point, that it's not primarily just an economic issue. It's about heritage, it's about culture, it's about spiritual significance, and it might also be about a certain kind of power that is made invisible by the market today. Like, it seems that they're poor, but actually they're defending something that is their source of power. So I wonder about the recommendation to quote unquote, sensitize the women who you worked with to be better capitalists when maybe they are resisting capitalism in their own way. So those are my two broad questions. I may be on the wrong track, but I want to just ask about, like, what is the source of power underneath this practice, and without reducing it to just economic production, which is what the description, a very male-centered history of Bunyoro has done. It's reduced the women who produce salt simply as producing tribute for the king, and a post-colonial literature about development, which reduces these women to being, poverty-stricken and need better forms of employment. I wonder if we can understand what they're doing as something that has a much longer history and is about sort of political, social power and not about economics.
Thank you, Doctor. I'll try to answer what I have really got. The element of Nyasimba God is not only believed by the women alone, but even the men believe that this is the God who gave them the area where they are staying, and it is the God who created that division of labor in the area. With the healing part, it is true that these people believe that their salt is used for healing, even at the kingdom level. That's why we find that during the time of Kabalega, he used to visit the people of Kibiro, getting that salt, but at the same time, they believed that he could come and bathe at the Kabinga hot spring as a way of cleansing him and consolidating himself in power. Then element of power and economy. However much the women used to provide salt at the kingdom, this did not put them in power or into the political positions. They remained as subordinates, and then these women still carry on this technology as a way of identity and as a way of believing in their culture.
But I want to suggest that we don't just think of power as being holding a political office. That, like, if we think of, the most famous example from East Africa is the literature on Nyabingi, which was viewed by the colonialists as a form of resistance, but also as sort of not a form of politics, as a form of it was in the realm of religion, or it was in the realm of superstition. But that had a long history of contesting the power of kings and central authority because they could heal society. And so that's the kind of the question I'm asking, and it may be impossible to answer, but it sounds a really interesting area related to Kibiro.
Thank you very much. I'll take you on for just a few minutes because I think a lot has been done. Would you like to go back to your methodology slide? Would you like to tell us the difference between snowballing and convenience techniques?
With the snowballing, it is part of the convenience, but the difference is in how you use that tool. With the snowballing, you are referred to a person who has the information, but before you interview that person, you need to make the person be willing to participate into the study, and usually at his own or her own convenience.
I was very curious also to know, why were you interested in Kibiro salt mines? Why that history? Are you from there?
I'm not coming from Kibiro, but what made me be interested in this technology, it is after seeing what was taking place, how these people were making their salt, that really triggered my interest to get to know why it has survived, and yet we see that there are changes in other technologies of making salt.
So again, when you go to this method section, the expectation that you had, or you told us you interviewed people who are 107, very old women, and up to maybe 45. And I was curious to know what language you used when you're interviewing them.
We were using Lugungu, and I had the research assistants who knew Lugungu. So these were the people helping me to interview the people.
Can we have those guides interviewed? Because the assumption is that they knew everything and they interpreted for you. But anyone who looks at this would like to see how the language flowed. So translating these materials would have been extremely rewarding. And that also goes to the tools. You do define a few in the local language, in Rugungu, but not all of them. I think it would be nice, would benefit from that. Again, on methods, you showed us a beautiful woman who said, oh yeah, please put me in this work. What proof do we have that she gave you permission?
She consented.
Do you have a consent form?
Yes.
Can that be put in the book?
Okay.
Because 10 years down the road, she can say, these people are taking advantage of me. Last time we had someone say people refused to be interviewed because they needed to be paid. People were making money. So to avert all that, I think that specific consent form that she allowed you to use her picture should please be included. The other issue, members, that I'm so surprised about this work is that salt mining has dispossessed the young girls from education in this region. And the scholar, the candidate, writes that very clearly. And I'm wondering, is that a good thing? I don't see it even in the recommendation that these young girls should be given support to go to school. Assuming the government changed its mind and decided to take over the mines, what happens to these girls? And you're talking about they are not going to school. It's systematic exclusion from school because of salt mining. What is happening to that population? I submit.
Thank you, Doctor. With the element of education, I don't entirely blame the women who are including the young children into the practice, because when you go to Kibiro, there is only one school, which is a primary school. And in most cases, these girls go to school, but after the primary, because of the distance, whereby a child has to move on a daily basis between 10 to 14 kilometers to go to Chigolovia where schools are. I believe it is not the salt making that is hindering them from going to school, but it is the absence of the schools within the area that is hindering them.
Shouldn't there be a recommendation for a school to be built? I mean, you're talking of which century is this? Huh? The Sustainable Development Goals 3, 5, and 8 emphasize women and children and girls going for education. So for us to say because there's one school is to absolve the government from the responsibility of taking up that role. And I think this work that you have done is extremely important in terms of policy formulation. And the only way it becomes relevant is if you put that in your recommendation.
I'll put that into consideration, Doctor. Thank you.
I don't. Yeah, because it's women, gods, women, everything, but not women education. Our members would like to switch to the public. We'll allow an engagement of only 15 minutes because we've really used a lot of time. Professor, can we check online and open the screen? Yes, we have someone. Yeah.
Better. Yes, Juliet, thank you so much for this presentation. My name is Ojambo. I come from Chambogo University. I work in History Department, which I also chair. I come from this department. This is where I studied history. And I've seen here my two teachers who are still living and still here, Dr. Karunji and Dr. Barijira. It's refreshing to see you. I just have a few comments. Juliet has been dishonest. That's where we want to begin from. When she was asked by Dr. Karunji what motivated her to do this study, she has evidence to that, but she does not want to mention. Juliet started this study at master's level. And at that level, she did the role of women, specifically in salt mining at Kibiro. Unfortunately, we are doing that work together with Elizabeth there. And I thought that's where she got the motivation to delve into the technologies now. And I think that must also come out. I don't know whether Said is not going to say I'm also a dictator. I am not dictating, but I think it gives it more credibility because this is a study that has gone on for so long. Having said that, that means that I have a glimpse of this area we are that we are discussing. I don't know how Makerere University works, but I have been pushing because today I was very envious. I was saying, oh, how come I would have been part of this study? But we cannot follow the water that has already poured. Let's go on. First of all, I want to congratulate you. It's a good piece of work.
Thank you.
Unfortunately, I have not read the dissertation. You call them dissertations. I don't know why not thesis. That one we can have a discussion. But I have had an iBird's view, just grossing through. And thanks, I've also listened to Juliet. The first comment that I would like to make is general. Juliet is keeping a good breed cow thin. This is a cow that is supposed to weigh 700 kilograms. Because of poor feeding from Juliet, has kept it 250 kilograms only. And that's why you received a lot of questions on things that should have been explained in the dissertation stroke thesis. There are so many things that you have been explaining here, but when we lose you and we go to the library to read this thesis, we will have lost close to 50% of what we are supposed to be reading in the dissertation. So my first suggestion is that, please, can you feed this cow? I know it cannot reach 700 kilograms, but let's at least target 400 kilograms. I'll specifically look at the chapter where you are looking at where you're looking at the second objective. I think it is chapter 5 or something thereabout, where you're looking at this technology, the local technology. You give us a lot of the tangible, but leave out the intangible technology. And since you are talking about a historical, but cultural study, we need to see the intangible. You showed us the jerrycans, the saucepans, the whole thing. But when I read your chapter, which is 18 pages, I said, oh my God, the intangible, the technology, the knowledge, the skills are not well explained there. And where possible, documenting, because this thesis gives us an opportunity to document these things. For you, you're only picking a few things that you wanted to use to convince your examiners, and you leave out the documentation of this knowledge. For example, those processes that you're talking about are not well documented in that chapter. Intangible, by intangible, I mean through those things that we cannot touch, that we may not even see, but we can hear and share. So can we go back and look at, for example, if you are talking about why did they change from a pot to a saucepan? We need to see it there clearly. and how they did that. The Nyasimba story in our first work is more elaborate than here. So can we put it also as the members have requested? So I will really request that you do that. Beef up the cow. Number two, which is also very, you did not say anything about the literature, the debate. It is in the book, but here and the examiners, none of them has engaged except one. I think it's not just useful to tell us what the authors and the scholars have done and said. What is the debate, historical debate in this thing to guide our understanding so that you answer a number of questions that were being asked by people here? What is the debate about change of technology? What is the debate on the role of women? What is the debate on the area that we are talking about? I've also had an opportunity to go to this place. And therefore there is, you are talking about the sacrifice and the gods and the interaction with the people. I think there are debates, scholarly debates on those areas that you would bring out very clearly. And therefore that is my only question that I'm going to ask you. What are the key debates that you bring out in this study of yours? Second last is when you talk about this, and it has been a huge argument. How should we justify the beginning and the ending of this study? Should we be justifying it by the attack of Emini Pasha, as if we are looking at a political history of that place? Why don't we justify this by the technology or the practice? And I think, I don't want to suggest, but I can suggest that you go and find out something that is related to salt mining technology, which is our key issue. By the way, I agree with all the people who have said that the topic needs to be improved, because in simple terms, the topic should be somehow related to the main objective. They should be linked. When you look at them, you should go and know what is supposed to be there. So look at these years. Finally, the worst chapter in your thesis is the conclusion. I know historians in the future who will read this dissertation will grind their teeth. It's just 3 pages. 3 pages, chapter of 3 pages. I hope this is not the Makerere University way of doing things and I have problems. But if it is not, that chapter requires a lot of work. That's where you should show us what the thesis has been about and what is the contribution of this thesis. So it cannot be the conclusion, which is a substantive chapter, is 1.5 pages, and it's a chapter. So this is an area that you need to go and look at your thesis and try to beef it up so that we get serious historical conclusions. Lastly, Madam Chairperson, I have an issue with these recommendations, because these recommendations, it is something that we have been grappling with in humanities. For example, when I read Juliet's recommendations, they undermine the historicity of this work. She's appealing to the funding and these other things that I've been seeing. You must have recommendations that deal with and I saw that going on and on. For sure, how are your recommendations going to change this history? I don't see. And that's why they are only bringing contradiction. You are saying we should adopt a mixture of modern and the traditional. Then it beats your logic of argument in the thesis. And then the other one, which Edgar was taking you on. So I know recommendations are a requirement, by your department in the thesis, but you need to be very careful, and we need a bigger debate. This is not for Juliet. We need a bigger debate with the department on historical work, which is from 1894 to 1997. What is the value of these recommendations? Thank you so much. I wish you all the best.
Thank you very much. I'll give Juliet just 1 minute to give a rejoinder.
Thank you, Dr. Jambo. Basing on the question that what are the key debates that my study brings about, one of the key debates that my study brings is the centrality and the role of the women in state building. When I use the women who carry out salt making at Kibiro, they have been very vital in state building right from the time of Bunyoro Chitara Kingdom. So that is one of the debates, and maybe another debate is the role of beliefs or the role of spirits in bringing development and helping the people to survive in an area.
Okay, thank you very much. Members, any other question? One more? Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Juliet, I celebrate you for coming this far and for giving a voice to those women in Kibiro. Yeah, thank you for that great work, and thank you for bringing Kibiro Salt right here. I'm excited. I'm excited. Yes. What did the women and the people of Kibiro call it? You call it Kibiro Salt. What did they say? Because the Rutoro in me knows that salt is ekisura, omunyu. What did those people say?
They call it wakala or omunyu.
And what does Kibiro mean?
Kibiro is a name that came after the mispronunciation from Chibira.
Mukibira. Omunyu, Mukibira. Congratulations and well done.
So I think we're going to expand our list of local words. Thank you very much, Doctor. At this point, I would like to ask that the panelists remain here while Juliet and the troop step out for a few minutes, and we'll call you back. Please don't go very far. It won't take very long. For those of you online, thank you very much. Please hang in there. But we're going to have to seal as the panel deliberates, and we'll bring you back after. You're very welcome back from the short break. The panel has listened to you and have deliberated and have found you worthy of a PhD in history. Congratulations. The panel also enjoyed your presentation and have also highlighted a few issues that they think you need to address. First and foremost, you're going to continue working with your supervisors, and it will be expected that as you work with them and finalize a compliance report is submitted, subject to the corrections you'll have made that you'll receive from the external examiners, internal examiners, and the final report from the Secretariat. The panel has highlighted a couple of areas that need to be revised. The contentious one, I think that must have come off as the title. So you'll work with your supervisors to review the title. There was also a concern around the use of the word processing or lack thereof that you need to pay attention to. The periodization of the study has to be re-justified. I think we had good input with good references that the panelists have provided you to persuade you that you should change the period of the study. One other very salient issue was the conceptualization of manualness in salt production, which the panel thinks you need to pay attention to, especially to explain why they are prevented from salt mining, the argument that was given on the impact salt mining had on their manualness, as well as the salt production and simply not emphasizing only the Nyasimba said, Nyasimba references. What is it about men that we really need to pay attention to? Chapter 5 needs to be beefed up because you reference intangible culture, but you simply sweepingly highlight it, but don't explain it. So what are the exact taboos? What are the skills? What are the customs and belief systems that are associated with salt mining? The panel also thinks you have to reposition the importance of women and not simply as being economically strong or economically engaged, but what is the other power around women that comes with this salt mining, especially where you mentioned the issues of the rituals. The other part that was also very contentious, as you recall, are the recommendations that you make. The panel thinks you should align them with your objectives so that they speak to them. They've strongly recommended that you may want to remove the recommendation on the site being a heritage site because that stands in opposite of what the work is all about. If you're preserving and yet you're making it a heritage, what exactly are you doing? The recommendation on sensitization of women stood out, very ironic that that also went with the blending of the modern and the indigenous technologies. Since your work is about strengthening this technology and its history, then the blending with modernity becomes extremely controversial. In terms of your bibliography, please only reference the books that you have used. So clean up that. And I think finally, editing and editing the work thoroughly is going to be one of the key issues that will be looked out for. I think that's it. Members, anything I've left out? So you have like 3 months to do this, but if you do it in one night, knowing the deadline that we have, I think that will be a good thing. So once again, I take the opportunity to welcome again the principal. she principally came to test the salt. I think that was one of the yeah. But yes, in your interest, Prof, the issue of intangible culture, the rituals, the taboos and skills, we felt needed to be strengthened. So I don't know if you're giving her also a postdoc to investigate the importance of this spiritual religion and okay, so thank you very much. And I think we go with our normal celebrating of pictures and photo shoots. And thank you very much once again. It's been a pleasure chairing this defense. I'll let the candidate say a few words.
Thank you so much, Chair. Thank you so much, the independent reader and other panelists. I would like to thank my mentors, Professor and Dr. Pamela. Thank you so much. I would also like to thank my sponsors, that is Gilda Henkel, with the help of Dr. Nabutani and Dr. Levis. Thank you so much for sponsoring this education, which has brought me up to this level. I thank the departmental members of Chambogo and of Makerere, that is the Department of History, Archaeology and Heritage Studies. Thank you so much, because you've been very smooth. You've made my journey smooth. Whenever I would approach you, I would get the support. I would thank all my friends, my family, all the people who have sacrificed their time for me to listen to what I've been presenting. The online audience, thank you. And everyone, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. So the celebration starts, I can see.